It's great to have Neels Botha speaking today. He's up at Ruakura in Hamilton with AgResearch, and Neels is going to be talking and sharing some of the work that he's been involved in looking at the cost-benefit analysis. So he has been looking at taking the co-innovation approach and comparing that to more of a traditional kind of extension approach and not using our co-innovation kind of principles and practices. So I'm looking forward to that, but I do need to give a big thank you to Neels because he stepped in at the last moment to replace James, who I had organised to do this seminar. So I just really do want to say thank you so much, Neels, and I am looking forward to hearing about this cost-benefit analysis. So I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Neels.
Thanks, John and Denise. Yes, I think I know all of you. I can see who's joined in. So hello to all of you. This is a paper that I wrote with quite a few other people, as you can see on the screen. And a big thanks to particularly Stephen, Sinclair, James, Paula, and some of the others who actually made quite a contribution to the paper. The paper was presented at a conference in Paris by Tracy Payne. It's about a month ago. I invited Tracy to be co-presenter today, but she unfortunately couldn't make it. And I think she did a great job there. She actually gave us feedback on the responses from people, and I think it was all very positive and very good. So today I'm going to talk about the economic impacts of co-innovation, and particularly we're going to look at dairy heifer rearing in New Zealand. Thank you. So John, there's a poll in the beginning.
There is. So folks, you should now see a poll. So it's as easy as clicking the little radio button to the left to indicate which stream that you're mainly involved with. So 1, 2, 3, or none of the above. And I'll share the results so we can all see. So Neels, I can see that there's 40% from streams 1, 40 from 2, 20 from stream 3. So that's a good indication of where people are coming from.
Well, thanks, John. That's quite good that we've got people from the community of practice actually tapping into this. So I'm talking to people who actually know me, and this makes it a bit more relaxed for me. Just an overview of the paper that Tracy gave is just an introduction. Talk quickly about primary innovation. I won't spend a lot of time on that because all of you are quite familiar with the program. Then the methodology and findings, brief summary, and then some questions. You will actually have a break twice. Just after the analytical framework, you'll have the opportunity to ask a few questions, so I don't talk too much. And then after, I think, the target market size, there's another opportunity before I get into the brief summary and so on. So just hang on, it's not going to take too long before you get your first break. So as you know, agri-foods is really important to New Zealand. And over the last 100 years, it's actually New Zealand's largest single export, and it's quite critical to New Zealand's economic performance. Part of that is farming, key part of the agri-food sector, and obviously there are opportunities to enhance the performance through improved on-farm efficiencies, as we all know. And as you know, there are different approaches to research, development, extension, RD&E as they call it, particularly in Australia, more broadly referred to as innovation. This is one way of addressing on-farm efficiencies. And as you know, there's been a shift from technology transfers to more linear to less linear approaches, like ARCIS and AIS, which is Agricultural Knowledge Innovation Systems and Agricultural Innovation Systems. And this is how we arrived at the term co-innovation. And as James Turner so eloquently pointed out in one of his publications in last year, co-innovation happens when end users are involved in determining the objectives of development and when they utilize their skills and knowledge in designing and undertaking research, as well as translating research results into technologies and practices. So it's quite a complex way of looking at it. And unfortunately, co-innovation has not been evaluated much. It's only happened twice that we could find in the literature. And in both cases, there were positive returns for co-innovation as compared to technology transfer, so that's good. And this lack of evaluation or impact assessment has been blamed for the low uptake of this particular approach. I think it's more widely than that. People are just used to doing what they're doing and they keep on doing it. So the question we're asking when we do this analysis is actually, does co-innovation lead to faster and or greater adoption than impact than business as usual? And is this affordable given the additional actors and time involved? Quite a few of the people involved in co-innovation said, you know, it takes a lot of time. It's really hard work. Is it worth doing it? And part of our analysis is about finding out whether it's really worthwhile. And as you know, this is the diagram of all the case studies, and you can clearly see where it sits. Dairy heifer rearing sits over here, which is in the adoption space. After the conference in France, Tracy actually came back where the French sort of organized their things a bit differently. And we're talking now whether we need to revamp this particular way of organizing it or not. But for now, this is where it sits. Dairy heifer rearing sort of sitting in the adoption space. So what is the method we use actually? This is a case study approach, doing cost-benefit analysis. And as you know, it's ex-ante, so it's ongoing. It's not ex-post. In the methodology section, I will actually describe the cost-benefit analysis, how it works, including the use of the ADOPT tool. Now, the ADOPT tool is also called Adoption and Diffusion Outcome Prediction Tool, as you know. And this was designed by people in Australia. We find it quite useful to actually use in this regard. And we also use the systems dynamic model called VENSIM. There's a full paper on this, so if you're interested, I can send you the copy of that. But I won't cover everything today. And then also we try to predict the adoption of practices associated with heifer rearing. That's the method. And our analytical framework consists of a few things. We used existing literature, industry and an industry workshop to gather data for this cost-benefit analysis. We evaluated the net economic benefit between two scenarios, obviously heifer rearing, which we call the co-innovation approach, abbreviated as co-innovation, as you see there. And then the business as usual, which we took as technology transfer, or the counterfactual. Now, some people don't like the word counterfactual. They say it's a strange word, but in economics, that's quite an acceptable term. This is what you would have done if you didn't do, you know, this co-innovation. And then also the net benefits of co-innovation. We estimated that using a few things, like a spreadsheet and system dynamic analysis, and that's called VENSIM. That's the model we use there, and to predict the technology uptake using an ADOPT. We also combined that with estimates of the number of heifers reared using good practice under each of the co-innovation and counterfactual. And then we used VENSIM to do a sensitivity analysis of the net benefits. So broadly, this is the analytical framework, and if you get this, if you understand that, the rest of the presentation will be quite easy, because I'll go through the last 3 bullet points: the predicted technology uptake, the estimated number, the sensitivity analysis. One by one, I'll give you the findings from each of those before I summarize all the findings together. So just to get an idea, are you okay with the analytical framework, or do you want me to explain a bit more? You can raise your hand, I think, John.
Yes, so raise your hand if you're okay with the analytical framework. Is that the question, Neels?
Yes, please.
Good. Okay, so technology being as it is, only I get to see your hand. So we've got 5. So all but, yeah, so we could say all but 1 people have raised their hands. and that other person may have just left their desk briefly.
Yep. All right. So I'll just continue then. Thank you. Any questions maybe or comments at this time?
Let's see. Yeah, there's no questions. No, people are saying they're good with that. A question here, were you looking for hard numbers or just exploratory data?
I think we were just exploring, and we were looking for some hard numbers in the literature. Some of those numbers were available, particularly publications by Rob Brazendale and some other people. And then we also, at the workshop, got some numbers out of the specialists attending the workshop. So yeah, it's a combination of both.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's all for the moment.
Thank you. So in terms of the technology adoption rate and level, at this industry workshop that I just talked about, we used ADOPT, the tool. There were 4 dairy industry specialists and knowledge advisors, and they defined the counterfactual, the impacts, and the sources of cost and benefits for this, for co-innovation, and also for the counterfactual scenarios. And we used ADOPT in this workshop to estimate the rate and peak adoption or uptake of good heifer rearing and relationship management practices by the target markets for each of those scenarios. Now, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with ADOPT, but it uses 22 questions and it covers 4 topic areas that influence the rate and peak level of adoption within a particular target market. I was part of that workshop, and we found the ADOPT tool quite easy to use. And maybe just a comment at this point, it does not really discriminate enough between co-innovation and counterfactual for us to really say that it picked up, the finer nuances. But we ran with it anyway because it's a good tool to use. Maybe just a quick sort of discussion about how we did run the workshop. The workshop participants individually applied ADOPT to the co-innovation scenario, and then we discussed, the assumptions and findings with each other. We used the consensus decision-making process to determine answers to each of these 22 questions. We used that for both scenarios. And then we discussed, the findings and the assumptions for both scenarios. So we had this consensus decision-making, and we did a rerun of ADOPT for both these scenarios just to make sure that we got it right, and then we talked about that. I think that's probably enough about that. So what did we find? This is the graph coming out of ADOPT. And this shows the predicted adoption rate and levels for the co-innovation approach and for the counterfactual. This is co-innovation, the dark line going up here. And counterfactual is the other one, that's sort of technology transfer. And to be honest, we hope they would be further apart. Co-innovation would be much different and a much stronger sort of rate and peak level of adoption. And as I said, I don't think the ADOPT tool really picks up well enough what we wanted to do. But we actually found running this model that the co-innovation scenario has a slightly higher predicted level of adoption than the counterfactual. As you can see over there, it's a bit higher. Co-innovation takes fewer years to peak adoption. It's a bit quicker to get there than the other one over there. And it's got a higher 5- and 10-year adoption level than the counterfactual. You can see the difference between the lines here and there. This is what I'm referring to. So this is using ADOPT, and this is what we found. So co-innovation is good so far, or better than counterfactual in terms of this. And then we move to the target market size, which is quite an interesting exercise to go through. We estimated the market size at the same workshop that I just talked about, And the target market is the number of heifers out of the total population of both dairy farms that rear their own replacement heifers, as well as those dairy farms using third parties for heifer rearing. And those third parties would be specialist graziers and sheep and beef farmers with dairy heifer grazing contracts. So these are the target markets that we identified, and we assume that good heifer rearing would cause field replacements, and therefore there would be lower costs. I think you'll probably agree with that. And this is what we found when we did this. So from the top of this particular figure, the total population size of rising 2-year heifers, we estimated by using industry livestock data and culling and death rates. And you'll see there's a 50-50% split here and here of this particular sort of 1,1 or almost million replacement heifers per year. And this is third-party rearing, and this is dairy farmers doing it themselves. So this is 50-50. Possibly 50% of third-party rearing involves grazing companies, with the remainder being farmer-to-farmer contracts. And this comes through industry knowledge and so on from Rob Rosendale in particular and Greg Lambert. So then we estimated the different market sizes. We argued that good heifer rearing practices will be more adaptable to both audiences because many farmers actually participated in the co-innovation process and workshops. And this was done sort of across New Zealand, North and South Island. Quite an intensive process. They're talking to farmers and hearing what they think and what they want to do. And the assumption is that this actually has created more awareness, and farmers and graziers had the opportunity to contribute towards the solutions, which is better than technology transfer. So the estimated market size under the co-innovation scenario is larger compared with the counterfactual. As you can see, under this scenario, it's 65 here and 40 there. Co-innovation versus counterfactual for third-party rearing, and for dairy farmers rearing their own stock, it's 50 and 35 for the counterfactual. These estimates were then used to calculate the annual number of heifers that were reared using good practice under both scenarios. So taking this into account, I will show you in the next slide, you know, there's a nice figure that illustrates this, but a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that these should total to 100, these numbers, but they don't. This is just the percentage of this number of heifers that will actually be reached. So they shouldn't equate to 100%, and this is explained down here. So what is the target market size for co-innovation and the counterfactual? And you will see that over 20 years' time of the project, you know, there's quite a significant gap between the two. So this figure actually shows the number of heifers reared using good practice by project end, year 20, over here, under the co-innovation and counterfactual, as I just said, over here. You will remember that we estimated this market size during the workshop, and the total population size of rising 2-year heifers was estimated using the livestock data and culling death rates, as I just explained before. And the size of the target market under each scenario was, as you remember, estimated as the proportion of the total number of rising 2-year-olds in the New Zealand population that are likely to be reared using good practice. Now the difference between this line and that line is about 212,000 heifers. There will be 212,000 more heifers reared under co-innovation compared with a counterfactual. And this means these heifers will actually reach their target weights when they come into the herd 212,000 more than the counterfactual. Now, I've talked quite a bit, and I'd just like to get some feedback from you. Maybe questions, comments on the findings so far?
Good. So, Neels, you mentioned the ADOPT model. Now, are we right in thinking that it was developed by economists and that it's more of a linear model? So they didn't actually include any benefit, or they didn't acknowledge any benefits from a co-innovation type approach. Is that how you might see it?
I think economists were involved, but people like Roger Wilkinson, who is a sociologist, was involved as well. So they had quite a good sort of a cross-section of people involved in it. I think it is pretty linear, to be honest, and it was based on environmental projects rather than anything else, which in my view is one of the weaknesses of the model. So there are quite a few questions around environmental impacts, while for the purpose we used it, you know, in the environment is not so important. But yes, it's slightly linear, but it was developed by a cross-section of disciplines.
Very good. And you showed the graph of the slight difference using the ADOPT model between the co-innovation line and the CF line. Yes. So is that difference statistically significant?
Yep. I'll come to that. You know, we did a sensitivity analysis with Vensim, and we believe that the differences are significant enough, so they are reliable.
Very good. Okay, so that's all the questions for the moment. Thanks, Neels.
Thank you. Right, so let's look at the cost-benefit analysis. As I said, you know, good heifer rearing, there will be few replacements and lower costs. And we used a discounted cash flow analysis based on 20-year project life, as I said before, at an 8% discount rate and an annual inflation rate of 2%. And these numbers are standardly used in New Zealand by authorities, so we're quite confident that we used the right sort of assumptions there. And the findings of this particular cost-benefit analysis, so what are the cost savings from fewer replacements? That will be the annual net benefits. And this diagram actually shows it. Again, for co-innovation, it's the dark line, and the counterfactual is the light line over here. Over 20 years of the project. And you'll see there's a time lag to annual net benefits under the co-innovation scenario. So in the beginning, it starts off a bit slower. Say from year 1 to 3, it's very similar. And then co-innovation is a bit slower up to about year 6, 6.5, 7 maybe, where the net benefits sort of become higher than the counterfactual. And you will notice there's a higher benefit under the co-innovation scenario, as we can clearly see here with the space there. And this is because of the large target market size under the co-innovation scenario. And as I said, there's about 212,000 more heifers reared using good practice. And this creates the higher net benefit. And this is shown in the next slide. In this little table, which shows the annual heifer market adoption of good practice and measures of the on-farm net benefits at the project end of year 20. And if you calculated the annual net benefits based on the 212,000 heifers over years, about 12.2 million per annum. We used the modified internal rate of return, and Tracy Williams said there were questions around that in France, and the participants there agreed that that's the right way we did it, using the modified internal rate of return. And the reason for that is that agricultural research investments can actually generate implausible rates of return on capital as public benefit projects, so it seems pretty high. But if you use the modified internal rate of return, it's much more reliable. It's much more sort of plausible, because it provides a measure of the return on capital for projects where the capital input differs between scenarios, like we used in the two heifer rearing scenarios over here. So I'll just quickly summarize the key findings. I think we may be running out of time. So based on what I've just said is that co-innovation is a longer longer time period to market, 4 years versus 3, which is not a lot, it's just 1 year. Slightly higher adoption rates, 17.2 versus 18.2. Slightly higher peak adoption, 95 versus 94. About 212,000 more heifers reared using good practice. The on-farm cost saving is about 12.2 per annum, and the net present benefits of about $28 million, which was confirmed by our sensitivity analysis using Vensim. And I think with this, I'd like to conclude, John, just by saying that we want to acknowledge the funders, which is sort of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, IMBI as we call it, Dairy NZ and AgResearch, through their in-kind contributions, particularly making Stephen Sinclair available to help us with the analysis. And then also just to acknowledge Tracy Williams, who did the presentation for the original paper in Paris. And with that, John, I'd like to conclude. And this is time for more questions maybe, or comments.
Yeah, excellent, Neil. So we're doing well for time. We've still got about 10 minutes before we need to finish. So there's good time here for some questions and discussion. So you have done well. So first question is, it seems the results indicate that co-innovation is for the long haul. Maybe this is a key characteristic for programs looking to include co-innovation. Well, what are your thoughts about that, Neils? Yeah,
I would agree. I think that statement sort of passes the common sense test, as I call it. It'll take more time and resource in the beginning to get it off the ground, simply because there's so many people who have to participate. It takes time to set up these meetings and work through what people think, get consensus on things and so on. So I totally agree with this. I think it'll be slow in the beginning, but in our analysis shows that it will be better in the long run. And I think it's the other analyses that we looked at in the literature, the other two that I talked about, I think they found the same.
Excellent, thank you. Now, early in the presentation, and I'm guessing it was about slide 5, you had a diagram showing where the different primary innovation projects were on a scale from simple to complex. Could you pop back to that one and just talk through why you thought this project wasn't maybe in the right place?
Right, let me just go back there. That's the one with all the bubbles, I think.
Yes, the bubble diagram.
Yeah.
That's it, yep.
Yeah. I think when we put it into this diagram, we thought it would be rather simple. But over time, as we talk to farmers and to specialists and so on, we actually realized that dairy heifer rearing is more complex than we thought. There's no single solution that you can just use and say, for instance, if you weigh animals, it will be better. It's a combination of a set of technologies that have to be used, and so it's a bit more than just adopting one or two of those. And for different people, it may be different sets of technologies they have to adopt at different times, which makes it a bit more complex. And this is why I think adoption is maybe not exactly the right place to put it. The people who actually rear heifers have to adapt their systems more to rearing heifers than simply adopt one or two technologies. So this is why I think we could probably move it a bit further on the axis there.
Very good. And was there anything that particularly surprised you, Neels, with the results from this analysis that you did?
I think personally what surprised me is that the difference between, co-innovation and technology transfer is not as big as I would have liked to see it. From a social theory point of view, we've got all the arguments sort of sorted why it will be magnificently different to technology transfer. So that was one surprise for me. I thought it would be there would be a bigger difference than there was. The other thing is I was surprised by when we used the adopt tool, that it did not really cater for what we wanted to do. I thought it would be a bit more flexible than it was. So that was a surprise. I'm not criticizing the tool. I'm just saying I thought it would be a bit more flexible, but it wasn't as flexible as I would have hoped. Those are the two main things.
Very good. And actually, just personally, the surprise for me, and I don't work in the dairy industry, but I was surprised that half your dairy farmers outsourced the rearing of their heifers.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. My perception is, John, that it's becoming more of a specialist job, and with intensification, people want to get animals off their farm so they can keep their stocking rate sort of at a relatively high level throughout. That probably contributed to it.
Very good. Interesting. And a final comment here is that co-innovation is going to be a hard sell, still in the midst of, the let's get going and get quick successes. But what are your thoughts about that, Neels?
Oh, I totally agree with that. Just from feedback in the field and in our innovation projects, is exactly what quite a few people say. Particularly in effort reading, they said, why do we bother? It's just so hard. Is the difference, significant enough for us to put up with it? So I think it's going to be a hard sell in some places. Particularly if you work with reductionist scientists, the hardcore scientists, and they just want to get the message out and move on to the next thing. It's more difficult for them and people who were being brought up in that sort of thinking and tradition to spend more time up front to sort of try and get things right. So I agree with that. It's going to be a hard sell.
Excellent. Okay, so we've now answered and responded to all the questions there, so thanks, Neels. I'll now pass over to Denise to give a few concluding remarks.
Thanks, John.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Neels. That's been really cool. It's been good to get a bit of an overview of the cost-benefit analysis work that you guys have been working hard on. So please, anyone, if you've got more questions, contact Neels and dig into it, delve into it more. So I do want to say thank you again, Neels, for stepping in at the last moment, and thank you to everyone who's come along and attended the webinar. This is the last one for the year. I will send out an email shortly to advise when we'll start up next year. It may be in March after our full team meeting in February. It might just make sense to do that, but I will confirm that shortly. And finally, I just want to say thank you so much, John James, for all your help over this year, making our webinars happen and getting some stuff recorded so that we can go back and have a listen and all of that kind of stuff. It's been really cool, and we really appreciate it and want to say thank you and Merry Christmas.
Lovely. Thank you, Denise. It's always my pleasure. I love these webinars because I get to kind of look over your shoulders to see what's happening. And I look forward to coming over and meeting with some of the team for your February meeting as well.
Excellent.
Good. Okay, well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll sign off for now.